Hi everybody, this is Rushabh here.
Yeah. So, guys, Rishabh will take over now. Rishabh, you can start.
Thank you, Vijay. Thank you for the sweet introduction. Hello everybody, this is Rushabh here. I just give a small introduction about myself. My name ends with the letter H. A lot of people just spell my name wrong. I am a senior UI developer and also the founding member of one of the startups in Goregaon East. So if you ever want to, just have some information about me, you can always go to LinkedIn and type my name. You'll probably find a lot of results, but just type in Eugenie and you'll be able to search me through. Now, let's move on to this session. Just give me one moment. Here we are. So in this session, we'll be learning everything about the world of ReactJS. So for those who still don't know what ReactJS is, it's a web framework, a front-end technology that has quite literally taken the entire front-end industry by storm. At this moment, if you have ReactJS in your resume, it's it's a given that you'll be given the job. So this is how important it is to know what React.js is. Now, before we get into what and how and why exactly is React.js so important, we clearly need to understand that what what is the need for something like React.js. So here in this session, we will be learning the what, the how, and the why of React.js, the basic building blocks of React, how to make dynamic websites with React, how to handle events using React, how to render list using React, to create forms with React, and as a bonus, we'll be creating a web page using React. Something like this. Okay, so let's begin. As I mentioned a few years back, before we go on to understanding what exactly makes React.js so important, it is very crucial for us to understand that what was the need for Facebook, the creator behind React, to come up with such a thing. So, if at all you have any questions, please feel free to just send me a ping on the chat, which is there on your screen, and I'll be there to answer your questions. So, yeah, coming back to my topic, before we understand that why is React.js so important, it is very crucial to understand what was the need for such a software to come up with. To give you a simple analogy, centuries ago, when Edison came up, invented electricity, people back then did not know what electricity is. To light up a house, they used to use candles. To walk down the streets, they used to use candles. That was the need for electricity to come up. Now, I cannot definitely compare React with electricity, but definitely React has completely changed the landscape for front-end development. Here is a brief history of all the things that has happened in the front-end development world. Now, if some of you might have already read about the different technologies that go in a front-end web development, you might have realized that I have kind of missed out on a lot of names here. There is Ember, there is Knockout, and many such technologies which probably have not been included here. The reason being very simple, because I have included these technologies which have literally changed the way we have started thinking about front-end web development. So without much further ado, let's begin with the first one, JavaScript. Before JavaScript came into the picture, all our websites used to have just HTML and CSS. Basically, they look like visiting cards on a machine. You could see the text, you could view the images, but that's all. That's all you could do. So when JavaScript was introduced, it added a layer of user interactivity with the websites. Now you could click buttons. Now you could go on to a different page. Now you could check things out which previously you were not able to do. That's what made JavaScript so amazing. But then, just as amazing as it was, there were a few minor disadvantages to JavaScript, which was then covered by the invention of jQuery. To give you a simple example, now if I want to add a button click, if I want to add a click event to a button element in HTML, this is the code that I needed to write in JavaScript. Firstly, I need to add an HTML file. Then I need to fetch that particular element, store it in a variable, then add an event listener called click, which would then call a function called listener, and that would finally lead a text called blah blah to be displayed here. Can you see how long the entire function is? That's what changed. That's what was changed by the introduction of jQuery. Now, jQuery, in its essential terms, it's just a advanced version of JavaScript. It simplifies the writing of code. To give you an example, all you need is just one line which covers all of this. It came up with the introduction of a symbol called dollar. Dollar helps you access particular element. You don't need to do the entire huge syntax, and you can chain events. So all you need to do is add dot click, and that's it. Your text is changed. So this has completely changed the way we used to write code. But then again with jQuery, there was a big problem, and that was something covered with Ajax. Now let me give you an example. Here, if I open a website, say Amazon.in, I'll just open this thing called inspect. I'll explain you in detail later. Now, what I want you guys to do is pay close observation to this refresh icon, the reload icon here. Okay. Now, if I click on another page, a section called today's deal, do you see the icon changes? Basically, the page is getting reloaded. So you must be wondering, what is the significance of this? So for that, we will check it here. For those who don't know, this particular thing is called as developer tools. As it goes by the name, developer tools basically help developers know everything about a website. So in this particular thing, you can get to know what are the different elements. You can find out what styles are given to each of these elements. You also have an integrated console where you can type any JavaScript and find the results. A sources folder which will give you all the information whatsoever about the files that go into making this website, and a very important feature called network. This is precisely what we're going to see right now. So if I clear this and I refresh the page again, you see all the resources that have gone into making this website come here. If you can see here, 3.4 MB of file was downloaded over a period of close to 2.04 seconds, and it's still refreshing. Now, if I click on another page, just look closely here, everything gets cleared and a fresh fetch, a fresh download is coming. So this was what the problem was with traditional JavaScript. Every time you have to go to a new page, everything that you had downloaded as resources gets cleared and a new file gets created. And just think about it this way. What if each of my file was a 7 MB file? Okay. And I've got like 50 images. Now, if I click on another page, that would mean I would have to download all those 50 files of 7 MB each again. Can you understand how slow the entire website loading would be? Now, this problem precisely was solved by Ajax. What Ajax did was, if you want to suppose say elements only on this page, all you need to do is change this div and not reload the entire page. To give you an example, check this. You see, the page is not refreshing. If I'm clicking on a particular link, it just opens that particular element. And eventually, if I go ahead and click hide download options, it just hides all these things. There's no point of refreshing any page. Now, this was a major breakthrough in web development, because try to think about it, the amount of resources you would be saving just by this feature. Now, Ajax laid the foundation of something completely new, a concept called as single page applications. And single page applications, they had been led very aptly by a tool called AngularJS. So what are single page applications? As you could see here, every time you would do something, a new page would be refreshed, right? But in single page applications, you only have one single HTML page. Whatever changes that you make, if I click here or if I go to another page, it does not refresh. All it does is stay in the same page. To give you an example, let's go to Airbnb. Now, Airbnb has been created by React, which is also a single page application. Let me go here, go to the network tab, clear everything, and I press refresh. You see all the resources are downloaded. Now I'll just quickly make a change. Pay close attention to this icon here. I press search, but it didn't reload. But all the results are here. This is what you call as a single page application. Think about the amount of resources that are saved just because of this particular thing. So this is the benefit of single page application. And when it was launched, AngularJS was at the top for for people coding in SPAs. As it's mentioned here, all the necessary code is retrieved with the single page load. All the appropriated resources are dynamically loaded. Suppose if I want to add a button, I would press search. All the results are dynamically loaded. And at any point, page never reloads. Now you must be thinking that AngularJS is such an amazing application. Then why was the need for React to come into the picture, right? I mean, everybody would be loving Angular. But then as we come to know, there were a lot of disadvantages of of Angular as well. To begin with, the learning curve to just understand what Angular is was very long. I literally have met developers who say that they took close to 1 month to understand how an Angular application works. So a 1 month of learning curve is a huge thing. Apart from that, one of the things which Angular boasts about is called as an MVC. For those who don't know, MVC stands for Model View Controller. Basically, Angular gives you the entire capability from viewing websites to uh, creating backend for creating data. Everything is given with Angular. But since it packs so many features, it also becomes a bit slow. And that precisely is where React comes into the picture. And with that, we move to the main topic of the evening, React. So React, as I mentioned earlier, was created by Facebook. A software engineer by the name of Jordan Walk was the one who first created React in a bid to increase the speed of rendering Facebook pages. And as it started becoming more popular, Facebook started introducing it into Instagram, then the entire Facebook page, and so on and so forth. So, what exactly are the features of React which make it such an amazing tool? Firstly, faster web development. Compared to Angular, it literally works faster than you can uh, imagine. Next, virtual DOM. This is a concept that we will be learning soon, and it's one of the most primary reasons why developers prefer React. It has a direct contribution to faster web development. Easy data flow. In AngularJS, often data used to flow both the sides. Suppose I'm a parent component, I would be sending data to my child, but at the same time, the child could also send the data back to component. Sometimes it would become so complicated that the app would just hang. And this is where React comes into the picture, where you have only one way state binding. So basically, there's only one way in which the data flows, that is from parent to component, and so on and so forth. JSS. This is one of the best features that makes React so wonderful. JSX is basically a syntactical extension to JavaScript, which we will be seeing soon. But it is one of the primary reasons which makes React much quicker. SEO friendly. For those who do not know, SEO stands for search engine optimization. Basically, tomorrow, if I type Cristiano Ronaldo on Facebook, I'm sorry, Cristiano Ronaldo on Google, you will be seeing a primary search of 10 results, right? This, these 10 websites are highest ranked in Google for showing content relevant to the search. So basically, these 10 websites are most trusted by Google to deliver the perfect result for the search query entered by the user. This is what is search engine optimization. Basically, React helps your website, to be very friendly for search engine. And that's why it will always be ranked in the first top 10 or top 20. And that definitely helps your website get more traction. Component reusability. This is a feature which is shared by both Angular and React. Let's just say that when you are in Amazon and when you are searching to buy a mobile phone, you will see 20 different grids having different mobile phones at different prices. But when you actually go about coding that, would you create 20 different elements, 20 different cards just for one element? Hi Mangesh, do I require to make separate render page for SEO? No, you need to continue with the same page. Yes, as for component reusability, if I have to create 20 different grids, just imagine the number of elements that I'll have to create, which almost all of these elements will be having the same content except for the title and probably the image. Okay, what if there were 100 elements? Can you imagine the number of efforts that you'd have to take? This is where React and even Angular come into your rescue. You don't need to create 20 or 100 different elements. All you need to do is create one element and reuse it again and again with different methods. Next, server-side rendering. Um, Server-side rendering is basically whatever websites that you create right now are created on the client side. That is, if the user is is sitting at his home and he's viewing a website, the page would be rendered on his machine instead of being rendered on the server. But React enables you to create the websites on the server, and thereby it's another amazing feature. As for your question, Mangesh, yes, we do run JS on these single pages. Moving on, let's first look at virtual DOM. Does anybody know what a DOM tree is? Well, for those of you who don't, let me just explain that with a simple example here. Do you see the small HTML file here? It's just got a head, it's got a body, and that's it, right? So often in college, when I used to code, I always used to keep wondering that, okay, I have created this HTML page, but how does a browser understand that, okay, this element should be placed here and this element should be placed inside another element? This is what is explained through DOM tree. So what DOM tree does is, whenever it encounters these braces, this angular thingy, it creates a node element. It then looks for an ending brace like this. If it does not find an ending brace, it moves on to the next element and creates a node element for that. And it keeps doing that until it reaches these ending braces. And when it finally does, it creates a tree structure. So to give you a quick example, we have HTML, and inside HTML, the browser first finds head, so it creates a head. Next, inside the head, it does not find the ending to that head element, but instead finds something called as title. So it creates a title. And as you can see, inside the title, we have a children called hello world. And then the head tag ends. So we've got the head element. I'm sorry, the body somehow just magically appeared here. But after the head is completed, we find the body. Inside body, again, it does not find the end tag. So it moves on to h1. It adds the children as hello world, the class as header. And then it finds a div where it first finds p and then finds an image. And finally, the div tag is closed, the body tag is closed, and the HTML tag is closed. This is what is called as a DOM tree. This is how the browser understands how to render a page. Now, when you go to a website like Amazon, as I had just shown you on the network tab, it clears all the resources on going to another page. So when it does that, it also deletes the entire DOM tree structure, and on the loading of a new page, recreates the entire structure. So just imagine that if I had to only change this image, does it require an entire restructuring of the DOM tree? No, right? This is what is helped by a concept called as virtual DOM by React. What React does is at the moment it finds that there is only two changes, it lets all the other components be just as is and makes only those two changes. It's made possible through an algorithm called as a diffing algorithm. You can definitely read more about that on React's official website. But this is how React makes website rendering faster. Whatever is imported, whatever has changed, only those components are changed. Otherwise, all the other components remain the same. Now that we have a basic idea of what virtual DOM is, we'll move on to something more important called JSX. Now, JSX is a syntax extension to JavaScript, which helps you create React elements. So for that, we'll see a quick example on the React website. We go to the docs and we go here. This is what is called as the JSX. Now you must be wondering that, okay, I just created an HTML element and stored it in a variable. How is that going to help me create an HTML element? That is the magic of JSX. It basically is JavaScript, but it also helps you create HTML. And this is how you can store multiple elements, render an entire DOM tree inside a variable, and then just pass it on to React for it to render that element. And it's extremely fast. You can actually go through the entire document here, but as we will soon be coding it ourselves, I'm just skipping past it right now. I will be showing you a live example soon. Up next, we have a thing called Create React App. Now, Create React App is a tool chain. It helps you set up a modern web app by running only one command. Now, a quick note here, Create React App is not something which is developed by the Facebook developers. It's a third-party application, and that's what makes it a little different from React, but we'll soon be seeing that. The main code by CRA or Create React App is focused on code and not on build tools. Now, what is a toolchain? So let's go back to the example in college where you just had to create a normal website and save it. So whenever you wanted to view that website, all you had to do is click on that HTML page and voila, it is there in your machine. But now, what if you wanted all your classmates to see that website? You cannot physically go to every laptop and install your website, right? So that's where the software deployment concept comes in. We will not go into details because it is not covered in this session. But basically, when you deploy a website on the cloud server or on any server for that instance, you require a lot of tools. You require build tools, you require bundling, minimizing, and all those things. Something which a developer, a front-end developer, should not really be bothered with. That's where Create React App comes into picture. With just one command, it creates the entire structure. It creates all the node modules, all the various dependencies that your app might require. For example, as you saw, JSX, this particular element, the way this is structured, probably it won't be recognized by older browsers. So for people, for older browsers to understand what this particular syntax is, we have a third-party plugin called as Babel. Babel helps these old browsers understand what exactly is this in vanilla JavaScript, vanilla being the original JavaScript. So all these dependencies, these are the ones which are already installed by Create React App. So you don't have to manually go and install everything for your React app to start working. So let's quickly just see how that happens. We go to their web page, and that's it. All you need to do is these three things. Firstly and foremostly, you need to have Node installed in your system, and you need to have npm installed in your system. Npm stands for Node Package Manager. All the various third-party tools that you might want to include in your website can be downloaded and installed using npm. So I'll just quickly show you how to do that. I'll just go to my terminal, just put it here. And to install a Create React app, all you have to do is npm install -g create react app. You'll find the commands, which sometimes I definitely find it hard to remember, everything which is available on this particular GitHub page, the official GitHub page. But since I already have Create React app on my machine, I can just show you. So you will get something like this. Hi, Jacob. The -G flag stands for global. So basically, let's just say that if I was in a folder like documents, I have a folder called projects. So if I was in this folder and if I did npm install create react app without the -G, so create react app would be function, would be scoped inside the projects folder only. So now if I just move out and let's say if I go to desktop, create react app wouldn't work here. It would just show an error. So when you do -G, it installs create react app across your system. I hope that answers your question. Hi Aniket, how is React different from Angular? Just let me get back to you in a while about that. I'll answer that in a small break, which I'll be giving you soon. Moving on to this part, as you can see, since I already have create React app installed in my system, it just shows that if I need to create a new application, all I need to do is just add this command. So let me just do that. I'll go to the project folder, which I've just shown you. And I'll just do create React app my blog. Now here it starts creating the entire app. But since we do not have much time, I've already downloaded and created that folder, and I will just show it to you in a bit. What's happened to my system? Something is wrong. Yeah. Node.js also uses npm and node. So what's the difference? Anyone better than either? Um, so npm is basically a node package manager. It essentially helps you to use third-party plugins and softwares in any application whatsoever. So it's not just restricted to React or Angular. You can literally create any Node app and use those plugins. So I hope that answers your questions. Okay, since I've already created a folder, I'll just quickly show you that folder here. I'll have to open a new file for you guys. Okay, before we move on, I particularly use this particular integrated development environment called Visual Studio Code. You're free to choose any IDE whatsoever, but Visual Studio Code, helps you give suggestions, it helps you with errors and everything. So personally speaking, I would prefer having Visual Studio Code. I stopped the installation midway because I've already got it created in my system. But when this entire process completes, it creates something like, hang on. I'm sorry. Just give me a moment, guys. Here we go. It helps you create something like this. Let me remove the original screen. These are all the folders which are already created using Create React App. You've got a build folder, which is not useful for you right now. It's useful when you are deploying the particular web page to the internet. Node modules, as you had mentioned, Aniket, whenever you do Create React App, the node modules contain all the different third-party applications that are needed by the website. So Create React App goes one step further and installs all the dependencies which it think you might need and installs them in a folder called node modules. We've got package.json, which just gives you information about your app, the primary dependencies, a few scripts, and a browser list. Hi Mangesh, is there any GUI based tool to create React app or manage project or to deploy it? I'm sorry, my friend, but no, you probably will have to go through the terminal process. And don't worry, it's not that difficult. You just have to include one command and that's it. It does everything else. As they have clearly mentioned, you just need to use one code to create everything and you just need to focus on code. It takes care of everything else. Back to what I was saying, package.json, it's got all the information about your app. You've got a public folder. Now, as I had mentioned, React is a single page application. So basically, you will find only one HTML page in this application, which is this. There is no enhancement or changes in this particular HTML file. It is just how a normal app looks like. We don't have any script tags, any link tags whatsoever. You just have one div root. And this is very important. You always need to have a div which will be targeted by React. Which will be targeted by React to create the web pages. We've got apart from this index.html file, we've got a logo file, a couple of other files which are not necessary for you as of now. And finally, the most important part, the src folder. So remember this thing, guys. Whenever a server has access to a website folder, the first thing it searches in the particular folder is an index.html file and an index.js file by default. So if you have a folder with index.html already installed in it, you don't need to tell the server to manually go and check that file. It automatically does that on its own. Similarly, for index.js, a browser will automatically understand that it has to go here. So this is what an index.js file looks like. We've got an import statement. It imports React from a React file. How does the route work? Just let me get back to you on that as well, Mangesh. I'll just let you know soon. We need to import from all the dependencies React and ReactOM. These are the two primary dependencies we need for making React applications. We also have an index.css file, which has all the CSS style sheets you might need for creating the web page. I'm sorry, I think I closed that file. Apologies. We import a particular thing called app, which I'll get back to soon. And this particular element is what creates a React element. So if I go to the terminal right now and add a simple command called npm start, that's it. That's all you need. It will automatically open your React application here. While it opens, I'll just answer a few more questions. Can you please increase font difficult to read? Sure, Satish. I'm so sorry that you had to go through the problem. Okay, here we are. This is what your application looks like at this moment. But you must be wondering that, okay, where did all of these things come from? I mean, as far as I can see, index.html file doesn't have anything. That is the magic of this thing called app, a component. Everything that you see here is created in app. And this app is exported and then imported by index to create this. Now we shall use excellent question, Mangesh. So Mangesh just asked whether we have to manually go and reload all the pages. No. Thankfully, because of Create React app, every time you make a change, you don't need to manually go and reload the pages. It automatically does the changes. So I'll just give you an example. Like we had just seen in the JSX creation. Let me just create an element called hello world. That's it. That's all that was required to create a JSX element. Now instead of app here, I'll just send element and I'll save it. And see, you already got the code. So this is how React renders element. Every time you need to render an element to React, you just got to include this particular thing, a JSX element, and pass it to this thing. In our case, it was the app folder, app component, which we shall see soon. Let me get back to my presentations once more. Next in line is components. At the end of explanation of components, I'll give you a small break. Please feel free to ask me any questions at that time about whatever you want to, whatever doubts you might be having. Okay, so now we move on to app.js. Remember when I was explaining the features of React, I had mentioned a thing called component reusability. What exactly are components? So components are basically, it lets you split the UI into independent reusable pieces. and think about each piece in isolation. So basically, this app folder here, I can create 3 more apps with different features, and it can be rendered. All 3 of them can be rendered in isolation. They will look together, but each of them has their own logic behind it. Hi Niket, yes, it is very similar to Angular. Let me just explain it to you in the break that how is it different from Angular. Okay, now as you can see in this code here, uh, it is very similar to what we have in HTML. Firstly, we have an import statement where we import React. Every React component, every JS file which houses a component needs to have this particular statement here. This is an image and this is a CSS. This is how we import a CSS file. But this is where the entire magic happens. Now, there are precisely 2 different types of components. One is called as a functional component. So what functional component is? It is very similar to what a JavaScript function is. You have a function, you have a name, and you have these curly braces. But in a React functional component, you always return a JSX. So this is the JSX. This is the HTML that will be created. You've got a class app. Now you must be wondering, in normal HTML, we normally have class, just the word class written. Why is there class name here? So as I had mentioned before, JSX is not JavaScript. It's a syntactical extension to JavaScript. Now, class is a reserved word, a keyword for JavaScript. That's why the developers of React came up with something called as class name, which is exactly equivalent to what a class is. So whenever you want to use class in an element in React, all you need to do is make it as class name. So we've got a div, we've got a header, again with a class name, an image, a p, anchor tag. It's exactly how an HTML file looks like. And eventually, you do an export default tag. Sounds good? So this is what it was about components. Here's a little summary for you. Just take a minute and look through it again. And then we'll move on for a small break where you can ask me whatever questions you have. Hi everyone, I hope you had a look through this thing. Can we get the recording? I have a client call at 8:30. This is something that Vijay can help you with. I hope Vijay will reply to that soon.
Yeah, guys, regarding that recording, yeah, we are creating a YouTube playlist on which all the front end engineering related webinars will be put up. We'll also share the speakers, code files, PPT, and everything via GitHub repo. So don't worry about that. Yeah, Rishabh, you can now answer the questions. Yeah.
Thank you, Vijay. Okay, so for all the questions that I had missed out earlier, does Angular also have functional components? Just curious. Siddesh, I'm not so sure about that part because after jQuery, I directly moved on to React. My company didn't really have much experience in Angular, but you can definitely go and check it out once on their website. For Ankit, you did have mentioned, somebody did mention, yes, Ankit, you had mentioned about how is React different from Angular. Okay, so in Angular, a couple of things. Angular is an MVC. It's a complete package of model, view, and controller. Okay, so sometimes because it is so vast, because uh, it gives you the entire package, it also imposes some restrictions. There are some third-party tools. There are some codes that you need to abide by. You cannot change those rules. And that is why a lot of companies do not prefer using Angular, because then whatever Angular has suggested to you to use, you have to abide by that. Whereas React, in case of React, it is only the V of an MVC architecture. So the model and the controller part, it's all on you. You can choose whatever libraries, you can choose whatever tech stack, whatever technologies that you want to use for that particular thing. This is one of the major benefits of React, because it only provides the view component, it only provides the user interface part of the entire application. Secondly, as I had mentioned earlier, Angular requires a very steep learning. They've got a whole host of features, which is amazing, by the way. But for developers, they require minimum 4 to 5 days to understand every concept, and then they can start coding. Whereas in React, as you will be seeing soon, you don't really need to understand something. It is very, very similar to JavaScript, which makes it very easier for people to understand that. And one of the most important things, Angular uses regular DOM. As I had just explained about virtual DOM, when you use a regular DOM, you have to deconstruct, destroy the entire DOM tree whenever you move pages or whenever you move JS files. Whereas in case of React, it uses virtual DOM, which kind of is much, much, much faster than what Angular's way of operations is. Any more questions, guys? I'll just hold on for a minute more and then I'll move on. Hi, Kapil. So your question is two-way data binding supported in React? No. So in React, you have one-way data binding. As for the others who are really confused by what is data binding, you'll get to see that soon. But basically, to give you a small gist about it, what React does is there is only a single way of data flow. So let's just say that if, as I had given an example earlier as well, if you are a parent, you can only pass to the children. The children cannot pass an entire data back to you. I know there may be many use cases where you must be thinking that maybe children passing data back would be so much more cool. I mean, that's definitely a feature most of the applications would love to have. But as you could see, if you will just research more about it, you will find out that it can be hazardous in many situations. Suppose, let's just say that the parent had decided to change a word from and to or, and at the same time, the children decided to change the word from and to but. Which one would you use? Which one will the browser will get confused that should I use or should I use but? This is where React realized there's a big problem, and that's where it just created one-way data binding. Hi Mangesh, you have asked, can I integrate React in my Bootstrap jQuery based frontend without creating new React project? Yes, you can. You definitely can. Uh, at the end of the session, I will definitely answer this question for you. All you need to do is include the CDNs, the script tags, and you can choose a particular div and add React only to that particular div. Will you be introducing React hooks from Arsalan? Hi Arsalan. Unfortunately, React hooks is a really big concept, and given that we have only 90 minutes, it probably would not be covered in this session. Maybe you can join the course that GreyAtom is suggesting, and we will definitely be covering it in that. Can I directly include build.js file in that? Build.js file in the Bootstrap project? Am I correct, Mangesh? Okay. The build.js file, well, the build, I hope you know that the build basically is the entire website which has been configured in a way that the server can read it. So if you try to integrate React in your Bootstrap jQuery based project, mm, it will be a little difficult to include the entire build.js file in that, because you've got a lot of transpilers and different environments which need to be um, included, and unfortunately it's very difficult for a normal application to do that. Okay, so now for further questions I'll reserve some time at the end. Let's move forward to the next concept that we have, that is props. And this is where we will start building our application. So let me go to this code here. Oh God, where's my code? Here we have. Okay. So to begin with, I really don't need all this right this moment. So I'll quickly just delete this. I'll just add a word called hello. Is it working? Yes, it is. Then I go to the CSS file. I don't want my elements to be text align center. I'll save that and it goes to the left. Okay. So a common way to create any code in React is to have folders. Now every folder will be containing a JS and a CSS file. So basically, I'm saying that every component, because every JS file here is a component, every component will be having its own private CSS style attached to it. You must be wondering, why cannot we have just a common CSS file with everything? Of course, we can do that. But do you remember the DOM tree that we had created earlier? That DOM tree, similar to that DOM tree, it also creates a style tree. Now, I remember that when I was coding in jQuery, I often used to have very dynamic ad hoc changes. Let's just say that the first part of my CSS file is filled with changes for part one, page one. And then I move on to page two, and the rest of the CSS file is filled with changes for page two. Now I suddenly realized, oh, I need to make changes to the page one again. So instead of going right till the top and finding out where my page one styles ended, I would just append it to the end of the file. Now, of course, a lot of different people used to, use different techniques, and I was pretty naive back then. But as you might be knowing, having different style sheets for different files makes coding easier, and that is precisely why every component here has its own style sheet. So what we shall do is we shall quickly create 3 folders. Just bear with me while I do that. Here we go. So the 3 folders that I've created are pages, components, and common. So pages are reserved for those components which are the container for an entire page. So for example, if I am on, let me just quickly think of something. Okay, let's say Amazon. Okay, for Amazon, if I am on the home page, it would ideally be a home.html. If let's just say I was on a mobile page, it would be everything about mobiles only. And if I was on an About Us page, it would contain an entirely different HTML. So these are 3 different kinds of pages, a traditional page and a multi-page application. These containers, which will have a lot of elements inside and differ completely from the other pages, should go in the pages file. Components will contain all the small elements that you will be creating inside these pages. And common is making the optimum use of React by creating reusable components. Suppose I have a button. See, most of the websites that we follow, be it Facebook, Instagram, or anything, they have a theme. All the elements inside the web page are created using a theme. All the buttons look alike, all the dividers look alike. So if I want to create a button, I would very much prefer it to have the same styling across all the elements. That's where we include all these common elements inside this common folder. So now I have to introduce you to a thing called as props, which is what we'll be doing right now. I'll just quickly create a small folder called main. And in there I have 2 files. In main.js, we'll try to make it a class-based component so that you have an idea what we're doing here. For making a class-based component, you need to import something called as component from React. And the syntax is very simple. You just have to do class main extends component. And always remember to export all your components. Somebody had requested me to increase the size. I'm so sorry. Just remembered it right now. I hope this size is proper, Siddesh. I'm so sorry I had forgotten earlier. There you go. Now, if you look at the two structures, in app.js, we don't need to extend any component. Whereas here, we are extending a component. So what's the difference between the two? In app.js, as you might have seen in that small slide I showed you, it's a functional component. So basically, it is used for presentation. For example, if I have a button, the only job that a button has is to show a text inside it. You cannot possibly imagine it to be changing, right? Whereas, let's just say that I have a div which contains an image and a button. And if I click on that button, the image changes. Now, this is a dynamic element. And such an element can be created in a class-based component. They have a thing called state, which we will be coming to soon. And this is what makes class-based component different from function-based components, because functions do not have a state and we cannot do those dynamic changes here. Coming back to the code, I'll make it render. Unlike function components, in class-based components, you need to have a render function, which then returns a div. I'll just quickly give this a class name called main. Hello. And back in app.js, I'll just remove the hello from here. Import the main file. All you have to do is go to that particular folder. It was stored in components. No, it was stored in pages. Main. And include the main component. Here. Always remember to close this particular element. In any HTML or React elements, it's showing me an error that the logo is defined but never used. So let's just remove this. And yes, we've got a hello here. So now that you have an idea about what a function and a class-based component is, we'll move on to props. Now I want to create a navbar here. Okay, like I had shown it here. I want to create navbar. So what I do is, navbar does not fall in the criteria of pages. It falls in the criteria of components. So I make a folder called navbar. And I'll add two files, navbar.js and a navbar.css. Right? Let's move here. We do the same thing, import React from React. Quickly create a class navbar which extends. Okay, so right now I forgot to add the named import called component. So what should I do? I can just do this. This also works, but people normally tend to just add a component here. Always remember to export navbar. And here I will return if the class name navbar. And let's just say that I'll include the title John H. Watson, My Adventures with Sherlock Holmes. All right, so we've created the navbar. Now, what do we need to do next? It won't come here because we've not imported it yet. So import navbar from we'll have to go back one more folder. The double dots takes you back one more folder. Go to components, navbar, navbar. And you just include navbar here. That's it. You got it here. Now there are a host of CSS properties that you need to add. I've already created it once here. So I'll just copy this entire thing. paste it here. There you go. Since you've already got a class name and you import the CSS files, there it is. That's a navbar. Do you see how simple it was? Now, what if my title keeps changing? Okay, what should we do then? So for that, we introduce React has introduced something called as props. So what are props? Props are something as simple as arguments which are passed into React components. They are similar to function arguments in JavaScript. Now, all of you must have at some point in the time used functions in JavaScript. Remember how you always pass a argument value which is then used by that function to create something. Props are exactly the same. If I had a functional component like where is our app.js? Come on, where did it go? Here it is. If I include props here, doesn't it look exactly like how a JavaScript function is without the return part? This is exactly what props is. So we go to main, and for passing props to a component, all you need to do is include it as an attribute of a React element. So let's just look at that. I'll just copy. I'm a bit lazy, so just copied it here. Okay. Pasted it here. I saved it. See? Now I just need to remove this. To access a prop, you need to use curly braces. For classes, you always need to have this dot props, this referring to the class, and for functions, you only need props. And that's it. We've got a title here. So this is what props is. I've got a question. How is props different from Vue.js data? Uh, Unfortunately, Mangesh, I have not worked with Vue.js, so I probably wouldn't be the right person to answer this. But I'll definitely get back regarding this. I'll do the research on my part and let you know about it for sure. Okay, so that was props. Here's a little summary. Just take a minute, guys, and look through it before we move on to the next part. The last line is very important. React props are read-only. You need to make sure that you cannot directly change the props. I hope everyone has read that. So we'll move on to the next part, which is state. State is a private property controlled by an element which stores property values of that component. Sorry. Basically, only class-based components can store private values. It's the concept of private in JavaScript. You just need values which can be stored by the state itself. So, for example, and let's just quickly go to main.js. I will create one more component, a really quick one called card. I'll add two files, card.js, card.css. Just so that I can make it really quick. I'm not going to draw an exact element. I'm also using a functional component so that it's easier for you to understand the difference between the two. And what card does is it just gives out whatever title is given to it. Simple enough. Give me 1 second, guys. I go to main.js. I import card and here I just give the card element a title called hello.
Yeah, Rishabh, you are like clearly audible. Not a problem.
Okay, perfect. So I've just given a card title called hello, and let's look here. Okay, the element does not come. Does anybody have a clue why has the element not come? Can anybody guess that? So the reason why this text has not come is because it's hidden by this particular navbar. So to resolve that, I'll just quickly give this a class name. One of the most important things that you need to understand here as well is that I cannot have two elements together in a return statement. It automatically fails to compile and it looks really ugly on your code. So always you need to have a parent element. Just one single element should be returned at all times. Okay, I'll give this a class name called card. And for card, I'll give it a margin top of 60 pixels. All right, we've got a hello here. Now, what if I want to make multiple cards? Hello 1, hello 2, sorry, 2, hello 3. See, this is how we do achieve component reusability as well. But you see, if I had to include 4 different elements, I had to manually create 4 cards, right? But what if I want to fetch this data from somewhere else? For example, the reason why state came into picture, let's just have a quick look at the React website. Basically, it helps you to have a local state to your class. So you don't need to always rely on props. And additionally, as you will see in more advanced lectures, state is the reason which can help you create more dynamic elements using lifecycle methods. This is something which we will cover in a full-fledged lecture, but I could simply add a state here with titles. Hello. And instead of doing this, I could just say this dot state dot titles of 0. Just copy this, paste this, and this. 1, 2, 3. And you see, now it has this entire state is private to this particular class only. It cannot be accessed by card or any other files. So this is what makes state such an important feature at this moment. As you will go ahead, you will understand lifecycle methods. You'll probably get to know a bit more about state. Excuse me. Here's a small summary in state. I will show you how to manipulate state by using this dot state set state properly. Hi Magesh. Okay, that's fantastic. I'm glad you got to know that state is very similar to Vue.js data. So one of the most important thing about state is the moment a state changes, the component re-renders. It so state is always used for re-rendering component. Only class-based components have built-in state object, and you can use state anywhere by accessing this. Always remember this dot state is very important. And the only way to change the state is by calling this dot set state, which we will be seeing in a minute. I hope everybody has read through this, so we can move. How deep reactivity works in state like for JSON? It does a shallow copy, Mangesh. So basically, if you have a hierarchy of 4 levels of an object, you need to go right till the final level and then change it for it to make changes. I hope that answers your question. Now we'll quickly have a look at event handling in React. Hi Siddesh, are you going to cover API calls and reading data from API? Unfortunately, no. This 90-minute session, we will not be able to understand API because it's a pretty huge concept and it requires quite a lot of time. So we will definitely cover it later. I'm sorry, let's just go. Event handling in React. Let's just say that I've got a button here called change. And when I click this button, it changes the title of the first element. How will we achieve that? Let me show you. One of the most important things, whenever you create a event handler, it's a common practice and a best practice to always call it with a function name, and that function name should have the word handler at the end. So for example, so if I want to call this, I will just do this dot change handler. And here, now I will set the state by changing titles. So before I change the title, what I will do is I will fetch it in a variable. Remember this, guys, always never change the state directly. Always copy it into a variable before making the changes. It is very crucial for you to understand that. And now I will do titles of 0 to Rushabh. And this new title will be sent to. Good enough? Let's see. It didn't work. What happened? It shows that there was something wrong. I cannot read the property state of undefined. Any guesses why, guys? Let's check it out. So we find out what is this. It's undefined. Okay, looks like a problem. I think we'll have to get back to this. So this might take some time, folks. So let me just move on to the original code that I had written. And I'll show you a button click handler here. Now, for example, okay, so Aslan has asked, can you show how to set a global variable and access it in all components? This global variable needs to be created with something called as Redux. It's a third-party tool which is used very often in React. And using Redux, you can literally pass a single variable to all the components. As for Mangesh, I'm sorry, state not what? I'm sorry, I could not understand that. Can you please mention what you're trying to say? Okay, I'll quickly explain what the button element does here. In the code that I had, when I do on click, this is what I do. Now, for those who are really confused as to what is happening, this is an ES6 syntax for calling a function. And what I'm doing is, whatever props this particular component is having, I'm just making this value a state called form elements. This state called form elements, I'm passing it to the prop called clicked. Hi Mangesh, for that error, should I import state in every component to access others? No. As I said, state is private to that particular component. So if you want a piece of the state to be passed on to a child component, you need to pass it on using props. Okay, so what we do here is we call a function, and using that function, we pass this state value to a prop called clicked. So if I go up, you see this is add blog. Add blog is a part of main.js. It comes here. So whatever data that you had created an add blog, this particular value is now passed to this particular variable. So whatever data was there comes here. And on clicked, we do add blog handler. So this is where the value goes. So this is how an event is handled. You always have a handler word and you pass it on with this variable. For more on how to handle events in React, once you will get the final code from these wonderful folks at GreyAtom, you'll be able to understand it better. Since we are running really short on time, I'll quickly go through lists and creating form. How do we centralize the data so as to access by all components? Well, you have a lot of ways to do that, Mangesh, but one of the primary way to do that is Redux. And I would highly recommend you to do that. But Redux is something which requires a session in itself, and it's a very huge code. So to give you a very simple example of what Redux does is, it creates something like a cloud, an environment where all your data is stored. You can literally have it in different files, and every time you want to access a particular data, suppose I have 4 files, A, B, C, and D. If I want to access the data from C file, maybe it is related to login, I could just go to C dot, say, username, and that information can be fetched in any of the components everywhere. So that's how uh, I'm sorry, that's how Redux works. For rendering lists, let me just show you this particular code. You see, I have created a state here where there are a lot of blocks, which you can see in the web page here. And I want to create all of them. So what I do is I pass these blocks to a component called block card container, where I use a function called map. Now, for those who have never worked on ES6, map is very similar to the for loop. You basically, whenever you do this, let me just show console.log log. And before we go into the variable, let me show you logs. It's compiling and now it's run. Okay. If I go to the dev tools, open my console, refresh it. You see, when we get it as a prop, this is how the data comes. But when you enter map, each of this data is now shown as a single file. You see, everything in 0 is now shown here. So it is very similar to the for loop. And what we do here is each of the blog, all the values in that blog, for example, author, cover photo, ID, synopsis, and title, all of them are now passed to another component, which then creates these cards. So this is how you render lists in React. Again, I can't give you much examples and coding right now because we are running really short on time. But once you get the final code from the GreyAtom team, and once you go through this entire code, you'll be able to understand it much better. Now, we'll just quickly see how to create forms in React. Give me 1 second. Now in React, there are two ways to create a form. One way is called as a controlled component, and one way is called as an uncontrolled component. So whatever form elements that you have created so far in your web development journey, those are uncontrolled components. So basically, if I start entering A, B, C, let me just show you here. If I go here, if I do A, B, C, S, so only after I finish writing A, B, C, S, I will be able to access that element if you go by the uncontrolled way. In React, in a controlled way, the data and the element is tightly coupled so that every element you type, you will get access to that. Hi Mangesh, you said that inside the for loop, if blog is modified, will it reflect its reactivity? Yes. If I have a map and if I change the value here, it won't affect the source, but whatever, let's just say that I have this element called key. If I change the key and pass it on to the next element, the latest value will go to the new component, but the original value will not be changed. I hope that answers your question. Okay, so for forms in React, we have this particular form element here. This is a form element. So in React, the on change and the value property together define what is called as a control component. So basically, whatever value you change, if I type A, it goes to the state and changes that value in the state. And that particular value which has been changed in the state is then passed to this component. So this is how tightly coupled components work. You have full access to the entire element. So hi Chandra, you have asked, so control will be needed for autocomplete functionality? Yes. You see, that is one of the most amazing features of control elements. So every letter that you type, you can actually implement the autocomplete functionality by using these control components. So if I type A, then you can go access your data, find out all the elements that are there with A and show them in a drop down. If I type B after A, accordingly, and so on and so forth. So this is the beauty of controlled elements. As you can see here, I have an onChange property which passes. So input text received some props from its parent element. So on change, whatever value you get from on change, it's always an event value which shows which element has been clicked on or which element has been changed. That particular value is given out by this on change functionality. So whenever I have that value, I will now pass it to the props that were received in input text. And inside that props, there's a changed value, which will receive that particular thing. So if I now go back to add a blog, you see changed now sends whatever data it received to input change handler event. So if I do console.log event, and I refresh this page, clear this A, you see immediately the moment I type something, I will now get the event value. Now this event value has a lot of things. So let me just simplify it for you and type event.target. Okay, and I'll just clear this. You see, now you get that particular element from which this data came. If I further go ahead and do event.target.value, I get A. Now if I keep typing, I will keep getting the new values. So this is how the control element works. Okay, so with that, I think we covered most of the basics in React. I know it hasn't been a very fruitful section. Probably there's a lot more things that could have been explained, but again, we have to work in a very small time frame. So now we will, once you get the code, the final code that I have created using React, you will be able to uh, quickly understand all the concepts, everything. And if you have any doubts, please feel free to get in touch with me. Uh, you can contact me on LinkedIn, and probably you can just email it to me. So for today's session, this is a wrap up. I hope you guys can read through this, and I hope you enjoyed the session. For any more questions, you can quickly ask me. I've got 2 minutes of time, and after that, we can just wrap it up. Hi, Sadesh. Yes, the final code is there, and it will be shared with everyone.
Yes, guys, like I said, we are creating the repos for all the sessions and creating the playlist as well. Just wait for a few days and it will be uploaded. And guys, you can just shoot your questions to Rishabh. I think we have 7, 8 more minutes, so we can use it fruitfully.
It was a fruitful session for me. Thank you, Sadesh. I hope at the end of the session you really learned something. Again, guys, I understand that there were many features which probably needed a little more detailed explanation. But once you finally go through the code, which will be given to you, you'll be able to use it, able to understand every concept. Okay, hi Rahul. You have asked me startup projects we can do. Can you please expand your question a little more? I could not understand what you mean by startup projects. Sadesh, you have asked if I have to choose among Angular, React, Vue, or some other JS framework, what criteria could I use? Okay, so it depends a lot on the build of your software. So, for example, as I had mentioned earlier, that React only appeals to the view part of a model view controller architecture. The model and the controller part is basically the database and the controller which connects the database and the view part. So if you want the entire suite and you do not have any problem in compromising with the rest of the technologies to be used, you should definitely go for Angular when it comes to the MVC architecture. Vue again is as a front end framework. It is very similar to React, but people prefer React over Vue because of the faster execution, and especially because of the virtual DOM feature. Hi Mangesh, your question is there in React.js library which build form using database schema? I'm sorry, can you just type your question again? It's got me a little confused. Oh, okay, Rahul. Um, of course, you can start with any project. um, I would recommend that you could probably create a to-do list, which is also explained in the official React documentation. Other hands-on concept projects that you can come up with, you can definitely recreate the entire blog uh, from all the. You can probably just go through the code that I've given you. Try to understand it once, and then you can start creating from scratch. So a very good startup project would of course be a to-do list or a block template, and I think that should be good enough. Hi Siddesh and Mangesh, so you are talking about the scaffolding code from DB schema. Okay, I see. So unfortunately I normally use Firebase for such data. I always, since I'm a front end developer, most of my work has been where I have been given the data directly by the backend developers and I integrate it in my React code using APIs or any other things. And when I have to actually create a data for myself, and especially an API data, I prefer going to Firebase. And Firebase is a web tool created by Google. And in Firebase, you can just you can create an entire data with something as simple as table. And to use that particular data, they have all the instructions. You just have to hit an API and you'll get everything. So for me, I use Firebase. As for your question, hang on, just give me 1 second. I seem to have lost control. Yeah. As for your question, I do not see a ReactJS library which automatically builds form data using database schema. I think we both have to research a little on that. So what I'll do is even I'll have a small research on that aspect and definitely get back to you about it. Any other question, guys?
Thank you, guys. I guess, yeah, still 2 minutes, which I wanted to use to tell you, like, please visit our website to check out our new program. And please, if you want, you can enroll it and ask more about it from our team. Yeah, one more question, Rishabh.
Okay, Chandra, you have asked for a comparison between Flutter and React.js. I'm sorry, Chandra, but unfortunately, I have never used Flutter, so I probably would not be able to help that. I believe it's a mobile app SDK, right? Okay. Yeah. Okay. For mobile application SDK, okay. Are you asking about React Native or Flutter? I'm slightly confused here. You want to know the comparison between React Native and React.js, right? Oh, React Native and Flutter. Um, React. See, I haven't used Flutter. I'm just aware that Flutter is used for creating mobile app SDK. React Native is very, very, very similar to React, but it is primarily for you know mobile tools, Android and iOS. So I probably wouldn't be much of a help there. Sure. Any other question, guys?
Guys, I think we are done with the session. Please share your feedback in the form that I'm sharing again. I'll share a couple of times more. Thank you, Rishabh, for this wonderful session. I'm sure the folks who joined today's session must have gone with some key takeaways, some learning, and it was really fruitful. Thanks for that, Rishabh.
Thank you, guys.
Log on to GreyAtom's learning platform to unlock more free content. Subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon for regular updates.